So a very warm welcome to this meeting of the Community Planning Partnership Board in Aberdeenshire, and we are, I think, expecting one or two others, but I'll just do some housekeeping as such to start with. We're fully virtual today. And IT support can be available should anyone require it if your connection disappears or has any difficulty. I would like to welcome Alison Evison. Alison's chair of NHS Grampian and contacted our board colleagues to ask if it was okay if she came on to observe today, and it's absolutely fine. And we're most delighted that you're able to join us, Alison, and I hope you find it a useful meeting. So thank you very much for coming along today. I'd also like to welcome and introduce Adam Caldwell as our new Vice Chair of the Community Planning Board. You may or may not be aware that Caroline Hiscox, previous Vice Chair and former Chief Executive of NHS Grampian, went to an interim post in Tayside, but I think it's common knowledge that, or it's in the public domain, that Caroline has been appointed as Chief Executive Officer of NHS Lothian. So before we move further, I would just like to congratulate Caroline on her appointment, and again, retrospectively thank her for all the work she's done to support this partnership board, and wish her very well for her new appointment. But go back to Adam. Adam has agreed to continue that vice chairmanship through NHS Grampian, and I'm very grateful to you, Adam, given all the calls on your time as interim chief executive, and we're just delighted that you were able to accept the invitation to join us, so thank you for that. We have some apologies. We've got Yvonne Boyd has apologised, and Nicola Graham from Skills Development Scotland was, in fact, I see Nicola on the call, is here in Yvonne's place, so you're welcome. Councillor Glenn Reynolds has submitted his apologies. Rab Dixon also, and I think Jennifer's here from Nestrans, and Jacqueline Lynn from Sports Scotland has submitted her apologies. Anne Aiken, our Place Director from Scottish Government, will be late in joining the meeting, and she will attend at 3 o'clock. Chris Murphy, the Service Manager from Communities Wellbeing and Partnership in Aberdeenshire Council, will attend for item 7 and co-present that item. And Angela Keith, the Area Manager from Banff Buchan, will attend for item 9. So the agenda has been circulated and you do have that before you. So are there any other apologies in the meantime, please? No. No other apologies? Okay, thank you very much. If required, I will take a break in proceedings for a comfort break, and I'll announce that at the appropriate time if we're going to do that. Can I ask now then, please, if we've any declarations of members' interests? If you just indicate by putting your hand up, I'll bring you in. No indications, so there are no declarations to record. Item 3 in the agenda is the public sector equality duty, and we as a board are asked to adopt the resolution to have due regard to the need to eliminate discrimination, harassment and victimisation, to advance equality of opportunity between those who share a protected characteristic and persons who do not share it, and foster good relations between those who share a protected characteristic and persons who do not share it. Where there is an integrated impact assessment, we have to consider its contents and take those into account when reaching a decision. If anyone does not agree with that, can you indicate, please, and I'll bring you in. So that is agreed. Thank you very much. Item 4 on our agenda is the minutes of the Community Planning Partnership Board on the 6th of December. Can I ask in the first instance if that is a true record of the meeting, please, for those of you who were in attendance?
Agreed.
Agreed? That's agreed by all. Thank you very much. Do members have any matters they wish to raise from the minute before we move on to the action sheet, or is it all included in the action sheet? No items to raise, so that is an approved minute. Finlay, thank you very much for that. So item 4.1 is the action sheet, which is also attached within your pack. Rob, is there anything on there you want to draw to our attention at the moment?
There's a couple that timescales are still required to be input, and if I may just ask those leads if they could put forward timescales off table, that would be very helpful. There's a couple of items there in terms of place, which will be picked up on the agenda today. There was nothing other than that particularly outstanding. I will maybe touch on a couple of focus sessions in my update in a moment.
Okay, thank you, Rob. So I think there are actions. Clearly, there's red writing where the timescale is required. So those of you who are leads, can you please let Fiona know what those timescales are, and they can be recorded and the sheet updated. Okay, thank you very much. Any members, any questions, or anyone any questions at all based on the outstanding actions? No, nothing. So we're content that those progress. There is an item 9 on the agenda today, so that will move to completed after Angela has done her presentation. Okay, thank you very much indeed. That is noted and endorsed, and we'll move that forward. And I just thank all the leads for taking those items forward on behalf of the board. Thank you for that. That takes us then to item 5, which is a verbal update from Rob, who is the chair of the Community Planning Partnership Executive. Thank you, Rob.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Yeah, the executive had a couple of new members at the last meeting, so thank you to everyone who put forward new members for the executive group. We welcomed Lindsay Martin from Public Health and Alex Stephen from NHS Grampian, both very welcome along to the executive group and willing participants who contributed to the meeting. Part of the discussion was around place, so we had our update on place. There will be one through here this afternoon as well, so I won't go into that in any detail, but I think it was well received. Good discussion around place and where that is going and when partners will become involved in Aberdeenshire Council's place strategy, which was useful. We are all working on the impacts of place, what that means for our organisation. So coming together on that is going to be really important as we move forward. The main focus of the executive group was some feedback from the self-evaluation that we undertook as a group. That was emailed out to all partners and completed by quite a number. The comments that came back suggested there was some ambiguity about the role and purpose of the executive and whether the executive is adding value to community planning in Aberdeenshire. So some question marks, I suppose, coming through the group around that. I think it may be useful, if I may suggest, Chair, that a self-evaluation is also undertaken around the board so that we can connect the two and see where that leaves us as well. I think tying back into that, the focus sessions that I touched on around the action plan, a number of those focused sessions have not taken place. And if I'm honest, we were struggling to get buy-in around the table around having focus sessions going forward for the executive group. So we need to look at what we're doing and how we're doing it. And I would suggest it's probably that all-encompassing look across community planning that we undertake. We did discuss how the place strategy for Aberdeenshire Council has potential to reinvigorate the executive and really have that hook for people to buy into and for us to analyse and look at how we're managing that place-based approach across Aberdeenshire. I think members of the executive were keen to explore that as we move forward as well. That is really my update. Chair, happy to pick up any questions that anybody may have.
Thank you very much indeed, Rob. Does anyone want to add or ask anything? Adam, please.
Thanks very much. And Rob, thanks. A couple of things. The first bit you spoke about around place. So I think I'd certainly see a huge value in multiple agencies understanding place, and maybe with the changes in the financial burden for all organisations, it's perhaps more important than ever. So I was just interested in a sort of a realistic assessment of how close are we to a kind of a method where all of the organisations come together in a really joined up way, and if we're not quite there yet, what are the sort of stepping stones we might put in place to be able to do that, you know, really well on an ongoing basis? So no expectation we can spontaneously do that, but if we are, great. If we're not, what are the things that would help us get there, and what's the sort of support we could give as a board from our respective organisations? So that's my first question. I've got a second one, but shall I pause there? Is that okay, Chair? Yeah, thanks.
Yep, no, it's Anne's fine. Thanks, Adam. Rob.
Yep, don't ask me too many questions at once. I'll never remember them all. On place, we had the Aberdeenshire Council place strategy through strategic leadership team this morning. So that was a really good discussion around what we've got and where we're going with it. We need to take that through chief officers, and then we probably need to look at how all partners connect into that piece of work as we move forward. I think operationally there's really, really good work across Aberdeenshire, and how that works. I'm not sure strategically we're probably as linked together as we maybe could or should or need to be, and that's where the work needs to be undertaken from my perspective. So we'd look to have discussions across all partners to look at what we need to do around that to enable us to move that forward. So work in progress, very much a work in progress, I would say, but the foundations are there and are good, would be my summary of it. Welcome to any other views that anyone else may have on that as well.
Thanks. Just before you come back in, Adam, in terms of place, and maybe this is for Jim, but that strategy is due to go to council, I think, in short order. Is it your intention then, Rob, to speak to partners before that comes to full council? So maybe Jim first and then Rob?
Simple answer on that one, yes. I've been intending to consult with area committees from a council point of view and talk with partners about it. And I think clearly come through to CPP colleagues as well. And I think we're striking a balance as ever in terms of having an approach which is going to enable a joined up approach from council services, but also that joined up approach from local public service partners as well. So achieving both and with community input also. So yes, and I think is the approach, Chair, in terms of making sure we come through to council for the ownership of the overall strategy in June, then that's agreed, but with the backing and support of partners en route to it as well. Thank you.
That's very helpful. Thank you. Rob, do you want to add anything?
No, I think Jim's covered it, and it is very much having that golden thread through it of having everybody around it. So members through the areas, partners, and as I say, all chief officers buying into it as well. So having those discussions about what will work on the ground with them, and then taking it through for ratification, sign off and comment by council in June.
Perfect, thank you. Now, sorry, Adam, I'm going to invite somebody else before you come back to your second question and or response and second question. I'd like to invite Susan Webb in, and maybe Jim would want to comment on that, comment on this as well, in terms of the North East Public Health Population Health Alliance, because again, I've in recent conversations heard that from Susan about the approach that the Alliance is taking, and Jim is our chair of the Alliance. So Susan, thank you.
Yeah, thanks very much. And I think it dovetails very nicely into the work Rob's described. So 2 or 3 years ago, we did a bit of an evidence review around place-based and the contribution it can make to population health. We pulled together partners from across the North East to have a conversation about what parts of the evidence we might be enacting, what parts we perhaps haven't got within our plans. And from that, a place-based network has been established, which is essentially pulling practitioners together with bringing in some experts about specific bits around place. And one of the areas that we've undertaken some work on is social prescribing, but looking at how we use green and blue spaces to support social prescribing, and that was in response to practitioners, and Aberdeenshire colleagues have been very active around that. But as I say, I think that very much ties into the strategic approach that Rob outlined. Thanks.
Thank you. Jim, please.
Yeah, two points really. One, as Susan just reflected, just the very concept of having a place-based approach we thought was very important. So having place strategy and place plans was fundamentally important in terms of that very local focus, in terms of being able to look at population health in a most effective way. And very practically, as colleagues will see, the place strategy we're developing has the intention to have 17 place plans developed focused on academy towns with a footprint which will be recognisable by communities, not as exclusive islands, because clearly the area interacts and works as a whole as well as those smaller parts. But what those place plans will give is a mechanism through which that population health prioritisation to be considered, to be developed, and for action to be taken place at that very local level, led by communities, led by public service partners in a joined up and a differential way as well. So I think it's both a good approach, as Susan said, but also gives a mechanism for population health matters to be considered by everyone. And that's what I've always been very keen on. So we have a very ground up as well as a top down approach in terms of the approach we take in terms of prioritisation of population health. So what, for example, are the big themes that are coming through from a societal national perspective, and what does that actually mean on the ground for local communities as well? And so the strategy is intended to be able to bridge the gap in those two respects. Thank you.
No, thank you both very much indeed. And I think we're hearing that, things are going to dovetail, which actually, is something that this partnership has expressed concern about before, about duplication. But I think we're hearing that there's lots of dovetailing and lots of aligning of the processes and the thinking around place. So John, and then I will go back to you, Adam. Sorry.
Yeah, thanks very much. I think this part about place has really got a great opportunity to join things up. So I'm here from the IJB, Health and Social Care, and there's considerations there linking into health, but also council and social care of what place means. So getting that kind of footprint that Jim's mentioned is really helpful. So we can look at that. But Adam's point is key as well, and so Susan. So I'm wondering whether there's a way in which across the Northeast there's an opportunity for some common frameworks or language, which then helps, our public health practitioners or other practitioners that, like police or whatever, that work on a wider basis to dovetail with it rather than talking about many different frameworks. And I don't know where the place is for that conversation, but that would certainly help the alignment that you're talking about, Anne, and the speed with which this can get some traction.
I do think that will evolve as this progresses, and once the strategy is in place, and that's going to June full council. But in the meantime, I'm sure the conversations around the partners and the area committee tables, etc., will actually be focusing in on some of those next steps, John. I'll come back to Rob to conclude, but I will go back to Adam now, please.
Thanks, Dan. Yeah, so just one comment on that, and then I'll ask my other question. So if someone mentioned it, apologies if I missed it. I guess for me, the next step building as that develops and is successful is how we have that joined up budget setting. And I'm conscious from different organisations there's much more than just place for budget, but it might be one of the areas we could join up some of the thinking cross organisation, not for a single budget, but to understand implications of individual organisations' budget decision making, which I think is one of the things we could definitely do a bit better than we've done so far. So my second question, Rob, was oh yeah, you mentioned something about the exec group. Just wondering if they were adding value and things, and I think that's a really important question. And you were thinking a bit about how we review what we're doing. So I guess I just wanted to check the framing of that I exaggerate for effect, but that wasn't that we stand down community planning because we don't think we're adding value, but it was definitely the framing that there is inherent value. How do we make sure we maximize it? So I just wanted to check that, if that was okay. Thank you.
Yeah,
Rob, do you want to come back? Yeah.
Thank you, Anne. Sorry.
No.
Yes, you're absolutely right. It's about just, I suppose, reinforcing the value that we are adding, so that everybody is aware. There's been quite a turnover around the executive of members. We need to ensure that the terms of reference are still up to date. Everybody understands them. Everybody understands what we're there to achieve. I think there's a real place around the executive group in terms of managing that going forward as well, and how that works. And I think just making sure that everybody knows how that hangs together with the overarching board as well. So realigning, redefining, all those things I think need to be undertaken just so that everybody really understands exactly what we're there to do, what we're there to achieve, and how we go about doing it.
Okay, Adam. John, please. Oh, you're on mute, John.
Apologies, I'm taking down. Forgot to take it down.
Oh, Legacy, right. Okay, thank you. Jim, do you want to make any comment on Adam's suggestion that we get involved with budget setting?
I think there's going to be always a benefit of working across different agencies and parties from a place point of view, so we can be joined up as local public agents and services, even to the practical sense that I think about, for example, public estate and public realm in terms of making best use of that, or if we're making separate and independent decisions that can have a combined and consolidated effect on communities, we want to know what those are going to be. So if we all act in separation and suddenly find we've all shut all of our services down in one community, that's not particularly smart move to be doing in that respect. So I think whilst we have to recognise the sovereign authority of each agency or body on the core, I do think there's both in terms of, if you think about a place plan as wanting to have a good common understanding from public services and communities about what's most important for them and how we combine together to be able to do those, then part of that has to be about how we're using our resources most effectively. And when it comes to having to think about budget pressures, about being transparent and open in terms of what the thinking or implications could be as well. So I would say there's a collaboration and a coordination as opposed to a single exercise that needs to be done in terms of how we consider resources. So I think it's, I guess, behind your question, Chair, is the extent of which that is a heavy touch or light touch, which still respects and allows individual bodies to carry out their own budgeting processes unhindered and unfettered, but we try to find the right way of doing things in some form of coherence as well, would be my suggestion. So I think that's something to develop. I think we've got a clear idea about how we want to do place strategy and place plan. And we typically have quite polite conversations about budget stuff. We need to think about whether there's a bit more we need to do without going OTT about it, would be my thinking. Thank you.
Yeah, I would concur with that. I'm not sure this is the arena for any detailed discussion around those individual budget setting proposals, but there should be conversations in any case, I would have hoped, across different partnerships where, you know, if a particular partner is going down a particular route, then they would communicate and look for the consequences of doing so across their partners. So yeah, but Adam, does that help to move that thinking along what Jim has said? Yeah,
I think Jim described what I was thinking about very well. So it's definitely not a single budget. I didn't mean that, but it's that coherence for sure. So Jim said it very well. Well done, Jim.
No, well, that's fine. Thank you. So I think it's communication, engagement, rather than this board sitting down getting into the detail of operational stuff, really. So, based on place. So that's very helpful. Thank you for that. I don't see any other indications. Rob, is there anything you wanted to add?
No, I suppose my final point was just around the self-evaluation and whether the board would like to undertake similar self-evaluation so that we can look at that everything together ultimately. I guess
Yeah.
there's a question mark there.
So that's a question for ourselves. So personally, I think that would be a very good idea, but I'm happy to hear from others. Is anyone opposed to it? Is that a better thing? Better way of putting it. So if anyone is not in favour of this board going through a self-evaluation process, if you can just let me know by putting your hand up now and I'll take you in. So I think that's a resounding yes, Rob. This board will undertake the self-evaluation process as the executive have done. But I think I have had discussions with some officers about that refresh and reinvigoration that has already been spoken about of not just the police strategy, but indeed this partnership and the executive. I think we just need to check in through maybe a workshop event that everybody is has still got the capacity and resource in terms of time, etc., to contribute and participate in the way that you do. I just think it's an opportune time. Once we've done the self-evaluation, we can bring them both together, the demand hours, and we can perhaps in a workshop format just check in with everyone and discuss just exactly what each of the component parts are going to do going forward, what our respective roles are. Are we focusing on the right priorities, for example, in terms of LOIPs? Will the place strategy give us a different perspective? Are we still on track in terms of the LOIPs? And are those the priorities now, as opposed to when they were set some time ago? So it's just a check-in and just to do that bit of work so that we're all content with the contributions, what's expected, what we're able to do, and how all partners can take that lead in certain parts of the work that we're undertaking. So we will have a discussion off table as well with our place directors and make sure that everybody's kind of on the same page. So that's, I think, the intention. Fiona will advise at a later date, but we'll certainly have agreed, Fiona, to do the self-evaluation. Okay, one last call for any contributions, but we'll return to the issue of place in short order. So thank you all very much indeed for that, and thank you, Rob, for the feedback from the executive. Which takes us then to item 6, which is reducing poverty, the local outcome improvement priority. And there's an update attached to your pack, but I'll pleased to welcome Amanda Rowe, who's going to introduce the report. Thank you, Amanda.
Thanks, Chair. As ever, the report does have a couple of areas where we're looking for some direction or comment from the board, so I'll pick those up as I go through. The strategic partnership, which is responsible for leading on the LOIP priority of reducing poverty, is continuing to meet regularly. And at our last meeting, we did consider a couple of our achievements. So you'll be aware from previous reports that Aberdeenshire is a cash first pilot, one of 8 across Scotland. So we now have our Cash First Partnership Coordinator in place. They've been in place for a month or so now, and they are beginning to make all the connections with people that they need, map what's already going on and how we build that. So we will continue to update the board regularly on that Cash First Partnership approach. We've also just completed a piece of research working with local voices around the rural challenges of Aberdeenshire transport. Again, that will be brought to this board in its next cycle, but it's a report that we are using to support a number of pieces of work underway, both within partners and within the local authority. There is some helpful information in there, and it also draws together some of the strategies that exist. So it's a bit of a one-stop shop approach. When we met in January, the focus of the partnership was really around the budget and setting out the priorities going forward for spend. That's attached as Appendix 2, but you'll see from the summarised spend, still a huge focus on that kind of cost of living response, but also that piece of prevention. So it's a lot around that income maximisation, but also on that advice, providing support around debt management, crisis support. But we still look to, wherever possible, it's income maximisation, it's supporting people lift out of poverty or prevent them going into poverty. I would say that although we allocate the funding thematically, they are all interdependent, and we understand that whilst it looks like there's not a lot of funding for health and wellbeing, that's where we're directly funding health and wellbeing projects, but all of the funding that goes across will have health and wellbeing positive outcomes, we would hope. So the budget will be going to Communities Committee at the end of this month for approval, and you will also notice that with the financial inclusion, a big chunk of the spend is around our information and advice services framework. We are almost we have just gone into the last year of that framework, so we are in a review period, and we'll be bringing an update on the review of the framework to the board for comments again in the next cycle, so that we can agree with all partners what is the right model going forward, because it is quite a significant part of our budget spend. When I came to the board back in June 2023, I highlighted that we, as a partnership, were commissioning some research into childcare provision. We were looking that across the piece, understanding that childcare is one of the key enablers in the prevention or alleviation of poverty, but it cuts across so many drivers. So it's our economic development, it's employability, it supports early learning. So very much a partnership approach, looking at different partners working with us. We've now had that piece of research out, and so the key findings are attached, so the principles are attached, and the recommendations. I think the evidence just confirmed a lot of what we knew, a lot of what the professional kind of and lived experience would have told us. There isn't enough childcare. It's not easily to access childcare when you need it and where you need it, and that the rural characteristics of Aberdeenshire make childcare quite challenging. However, there are also opportunities there that we can build on. So there are opportunities to look at how childcare can become more of an economic piece and can become an employability piece. So the research identifies a number of principles that would underpin the development. Again, they're summarised in the paper. They're at Appendix 3, but they focus around things like the availability, age appropriateness, being inclusive, and key. It is a career opportunity, and the board is asked if they wish to comment on those principles. Is there anything there that they feel might be missing? Is there anything there that they may not agree with? As I say, the research has made 19 recommendations. They're summarised in the paper as well, and as a group we are starting to work with all of these recommendations to develop our strategic framework. That's a mix of our Tackling Poverty and Inequalities strategic partnership, but also key services within the council, so our economic and development team, our early years colleagues, our finance colleagues, our welfare and advice colleagues. So we've got a lot of different services, different voices around the table to ensure that we develop a framework that works for Aberdeenshire, both in terms of an employment opportunity and that opportunity to support families with employability. Finally, I would draw the board's attention to, we had our 5th Local Child Poverty Action Report. That was agreed at the board, I think, the last time. We have a critical review undertaken by the Improvement Service. We have a particular partner that does that critical review for us. It's the Poverty Alliance. And again, we've got a number of areas for improvement. They are areas for improvement that we are aware of. So one of the key ones is re-establishing some of our key relationships, and we are continuing to work on that and making sure that through our GIRFEC groups and others that we are working collectively. But one of the ones that has come up that I know is also important to the board is that use of data, how we use it, how we evidence what we're doing, and how we use that to inform what we're doing. So I would just like to assure the board that at the moment, that is one of our focuses. So we have developed in the short term a dashboard to help us with our data, but we recognise that that isn't going to solve our issues. And we're really quite good at understanding the outcomes that we have on that individual basis. So for an individual, a family, a household, through impact statements, videos, or forums, we can understand the difference we make. But what we are challenged by is being able to demonstrate to the board and others that whilst it looks like the cold hard numbers seem to be going the wrong way and perhaps more children are falling into poverty, it's hard for us to almost evidence that piece of what hasn't happened as a result of what we're doing. So we are working with Fiona McCallum and the work that's underway through Fiona's team in looking at a data hub and the work that Fiona's doing with some of our public health colleagues to look at how we can be better at that, how we can look at using modelling to perhaps show what the trajectory would be, so that we can demonstrate that by doing X, we're not hitting where we thought we might have hit, but also at getting better at using data. And this one sounds a bit odd, but once I got my head around it, I was okay with it. Using data a bit more reactively. So we know that there are key single data sets that if we look at them, they will give us an indication of what might start to happen in a community and let us get into a preventative approach in that community. So whether that's around perhaps mental well-being and the prescribing that is happening within a community, or whether it's the increase in benefits uptakes. There are certain key data sets that we know if we can look at them, analyse them, they would give us that pointer to where we need to focus some of our preventative work. So working with Fiona and a public health colleague, we're going to look at how we can build that in, hopefully to the data hub, and really improve how we are using our data. So I'm looking for the board to make a couple of comments for me. I'm looking to get a sense of the research and whether you agree and support the principles and the recommendations, or whether you feel we have missed anything. Any comments on the action report and the improvements that we need to do, and if there are any comments on the budget. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Amanda, for that very good overview of a very complicated set of pieces of information. So, in the first instance, before I ask the board for those, those questions, Amanda, where does all of this sit in terms of data and evidence that perhaps NEPHA could help with? Is that an option or not in terms of data and research, where that might feed in? For example, there's a lot of data and evidence held about our council housing tenants. Neil Watts's team, are you feeding in, or are you connecting with Neil? He's got a huge amount of data around the housing element of things, and I'll come back to another piece of that, because well, I'll just say it now. What I'm thinking is, Amanda, there's an opportunity for the executive to have a workshop around data generally, because everyone must hold data and information about children and families. So just a thought, which I'll come back to in due course. Fiona, you wanted to come in?
Thanks, Chair, if I may. Yeah, just to kind of build on what Amanda was saying and hopefully to provide a response to some of your queries around data and who we're speaking to. So I am involved in a workshop that's happening next week with colleagues in public health under the NEFA banner, looking at different data sets and what we can do, how we can improve data sharing opportunities to work better together. So yeah, that is being progressed. My team as well are speaking to lots of people across the council who have data, including Neil in housing, and looking at the different data sets that we have and how we can layer those together to improve outcomes for our community. So there's a lot going on around data in lots of different spheres at the moment.
Thank you, Fiona, ahead of the game. So thank you for that. The other question though, Amanda, is how closely you're linking in with education and children's services based on decisions that have been taken there recently, and the independent, the private and independent and voluntary aspect of that. Because just to be clear, the opportunities for out of school care is increasing since the council took particular decisions. So again, just how closely are you aligned with education and children's services? You said early years, but
yeah, thank you, Chair. We are, as part of the development of the strategic approach, actually Anne-Marie Davis-MacLeod is the chair of the group that we have brought together to take this forward. So we are working closely, and in the response to some of the recent decision made, it's a kind of cross-partnership approach that's supporting in those particular areas. So we have tied that together. Again,
way ahead. Thank you very much indeed. John, Susan, and then Adam, please.
Okay, thank you. Just as a comment, it's really helpful if that kind of data that you're talking about is progressed, and then the joint working, those relationships, because those of us who are on multiple boards, there's a lot of good work going on, and I've been really impressed joining this board, the work that comes through this part of the LOIP. But sometimes I'm on other boards and can't quite join up the pieces of work that's going on there with this. So if there things like the data and then the place that we've talked about will really help to, and I think that will help to invigorate what we're doing around the CPP as well. So well done around that, and look forward to seeing how that comes through. Specific question on your ask about the objectives there on the childcare. Does it pick up where there are any national issues that are a barrier? I'm just thinking the way childminders are funded, etc. And is there a role for identifying that and contributing to lobbying on that side of things? Just an open question.
Through you, Chair, if I can respond.
Please come in. I think Anne must have just dropped off. Seems to have dropped on my screen. So please, Amanda, jump in.
There is, John, because I think that is one of the challenges. So there is something at that national strategic piece about how we can influence some of this, recognising that there will be spans of influence that we don't necessarily have that control. So we're going to have to work out how can we get in there and influence and see if we can get some of that into our control to make the framework viable and to encourage people to come into it as that economic piece, because if it becomes a valued and valuable role, it again helps that alleviation of poverty. So yes, it is there. That lobbying piece is effectively kind of tied up around that first strategic recommendation.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. And I had Susan next, please.
Yeah, thanks very much. And I'll maybe answer one of your questions, if that's all right, Chair, and then maybe ask a couple of my own. So in terms of the work the Alliance has been supporting reporting. On the back of the DPH annual report, there was an evidence review done around where we might wish to pay attention in terms of our poverty work. There were a number of workshops, and Amanda was absolutely key to participating in those. And we have a report which has identified some actions, and that report will come back to each of the 3 CPPs in the North East for a discussion and conversation before going back to the Alliance. But I don't think from the report that Amanda's presented today there'll be any surprises. There was conversations around data, and clearly work's underway around that, but also looking at how we support evaluation, because there is a lot of good work going on, but being able to demonstrate impact it is a challenge. So, but these are the things that we need to have conversations within the partnerships before we agree where we might usefully come together to work on. I guess my questions would be around, there's quite a number of conversations around transport, and just to say that we've been asked to take on the chair of the Health and Transport Action Plan, so it's an offer if there is the potential to draw those strands and things that we could do together, that very happy to take that forward. I did also, like John, pick up the national strategic influencing piece around childcare, and wondered if there is the opportunity to have a bit of a briefing around that. I'm aware that a number of us are in national conversations around provision of childcare, and it might help us be consistent with message. And then the final bit that I didn't see in the childcare report was some of the feedback that we've had around the living wage work is around flexibility of hours of work, and so being a bit of a win-win where parents are able to still be at home and participate in family meals, end of school day, before being able to go out to work. I just didn't see that covered in that, because I know it was about childcare provision, but to me that seemed an avenue that would coalesce some of the aims of the wider agenda. And then finally, just in terms of the Child Poverty Action Plan, again, very happy as a health board to make those connects in and make sure that we are doing and playing our part in delivery of our agreed actions. Thanks.
Thank you very much indeed, Susan. And Jim, if you don't mind, can I bring Kerry in, please? Kerry Morgan, our Scottish Government Place Director, has joined us most recently. So Kerry, I just guessed you might want to comment on that national piece first.
Thanks, Chair, and apologies for being so late, having a bit of a day here. Yes, I just wanted to come in on that to say that I am one of the Deputy Directors in the Directorate for Children and Families at the Scottish Government. My area of responsibility is something different, but obviously I have Deputy Director colleagues who are responsible for childcare. So if there's anything that would be helpful for me to raise with those colleagues, I'm very happy to do that. And perhaps we could pick that up offline, Amanda, if that was helpful. Thanks.
Thank you very much indeed, Kerry. And Jim, please.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Just going back to the point that Amanda made earlier on in terms of the sort of the data side of things, and reinforce what Susan's saying. You know, so as we reflect, we know and can show the good evidence and outcome in terms of the interventions that we are making and doing. And yet, if I understand it correctly, we've also got a more macro trend where some of our challenges are getting larger, so like influenced by cost of living challenge as well. And if I guess it was relatively arbitrary, if we look at sort of our allocation of funding under 3.4, and as Amanda touched on, for example, information and advice, just £1 million there. So there's a huge chunk of change we're spending on certain things. I'm really interested in terms of, whilst the interventions may be good in their own right, in that changing context and circumstance that data is telling us, are these continue to be the right things for us to be prioritising in terms of our interventions and actions as well? And so they're good as they are, they're making a difference, but our context is changing faster than that, is what it feels like to me. So I'd really be keen for us to, in a constructive way, challenge ourselves as a board to say, when we look at that data and we look at causality or correlation, and take that step back, are there different ways that we should be approaching this, or is it more of the same that we need to be doing? So I'm not saying it in a more loaded way, but I'm really mindful of what Amanda's saying and appointing data in terms of continuing to keep us straight in terms of interventions. And I look at, for example, some of the recommendations on childcare, as we also touch on. They're vast and significant, not all of which are going to be within our gift to be able to reach and achieve. But if we had to choose some of them that were going to make the biggest difference, which would they be? And would they change and influence and affect what our funding and activity allocation is as of now? So I'm hoping to be constructive, but just think, but coming back into the theme of it, which is about our context is faster than us in terms of change, and it's about how we keep our programmes contemporary in that respect as well. Thank you.
You've really summed up what I was thinking as folks were speaking, Jim, because budget decisions have been taken across all organisations. Services have taken decisions across all, certainly across the council. And when I was reading the recommendations, some of it was not sitting comfortably, based on decisions that have been taken across the partnerships. So I just wonder where that will lead us if we seek to implement these recommendations, which are, as Jim has said, things have moved on. So maybe there's a step before we get to that point where we have to consider those priorities and work through that from that point of view. So basically, I was really agreeing with what Jim has just highlighted, that we've all moved on, I think, and we need to make sure that everybody's aligned and sighted on where we are now and then what we do in terms of taking that forward. So again, in discussions, Amanda, you're having with Kerry, I think we need to reflect some of that where others have taken decisions we need, including the council, then we need to factor that in, I think.
I absolutely, Chair. I think that's been really helpful. I think it's helpful to get that challenge, and I think that is one of the areas we are starting to becoming kind of increasingly concerned about, is that we, with the data we have and the information we get back, we think we're in the right space, we think we're doing the right things, but actually the other data we have is telling us something slightly different. So are we really doing the right things? We do have big spend, but things have changed. So I think it's absolutely the right time, and I think that the research is probably one of the key ways that that's being demonstrated, is those recommendations probably take cognizance of where we were 9, 12, 18 months. That's how fast things now move. So I think that's an absolute fair challenge on, are we focusing in the right place? And if we hadn't focused there, what difference would it made? And actually with that childcare piece, what are those recommendations that will be the biggest hitters, that will get us where we need to be? So I absolutely take that on board. That's incredibly helpful to get that steer from the board.
Well, I think that's Jim and I. We'll hear from the rest of the board in a minute. So it's we'll sum that up. And in terms of HTAP, the Lynn Boyd led a piece of work across a number of partners, to look at transport for health and social care. So where does that sit? How does that feed into HTAP? How is all of that being brought together? As I say, I don't think, well, I haven't seen it emerging anywhere, but Lynn led quite a big piece of work at some point. So again, it's looking at the providers of transport, where the budgets are. I suppose the same discussion that we've just had around the childcare piece. So I'm happy to leave that. Sorry, Adam.
Thanks. And I was going to make a comment for the recommendation about the out of school childcare. And I'm not really sure if I'm agreeing with yourself, Anne and Jim, or saying something different, because I'm not sure I fully understood that bit in relation to the things that have changed. So I'll say what I was going to say anyway. So I was at something recently, not in Aberdeenshire, about childcare and the importance of it. So I think regardless of what's changed, the importance of childcare absolutely hasn't changed. So that's still a fundamental requirement for our population. And I think a really, really important thing for all the things that are written down around economic prosperity and all the things that surround it. The bit I learned from this other session I was at quite recently was that lots of the regulation and other things surrounding being a provider of childcare make it remarkably difficult to make it a viable business. And I know that lots of the thought is about how do you get, I guess, a community-led response where, you know, making money isn't necessarily the requirement. And I think that's good if we can make that happen. I just guess it's whether that how viable is that in a sustainable basis compared to an economic model where that becomes someone's living and is a double good, isn't it, around economic development, because it's both a job to do it and allowing other people to do other bits of economic development. So there was a bit about that, and just trying to understand, not necessarily for an answer now, I guess that's the work of the group, you know, how do you make that really viable? And what I read from the recommendations, and I think this is what Jim and Anne were talking about, was an expectation around, I guess, financial support for all sorts of things, which I guess isn't real. And so does that make it even more difficult for others to make that a viable thing to pursue, unless it can be by method of I guess, you know, for example, access to the facilities, which is to do with one of the recommendations, inequality, and whether we could collectively do that differently. And I don't just mean in council buildings, you know, the NHS has got lots of buildings and other people do as well. So it's how do we think broadly in that to make it as likely to be successful as possible against that background of regulation and challenge to actually make it a viable operation for someone to run. Thanks.
Amanda, do you want to come back?
Other than to say, I think that's viable, and I suppose I would agree with Adam. There is something about, and the way I've always been trying to approach it is it is that economically viable piece, and it is about it being an employment offer, as opposed to, that's not to say there isn't an absolute role for that community offer, and for certain, at certain times in certain places that will be it. But for me, the biggest reward will be if we can not only support families with their childcare that lets them stay in employment or whatever, but that also it creates that employment piece for others that works. Because I think one of our colleagues said about how do you get things that allow people to be with their families at the right time when they want to be. So there's something there, but I would see it coming at a bit of an economic driver piece, I guess.
Okay, thank you both. Adam, do you want to come back?
Sorry, Anne, I meant to say one more thing. I absolutely in support of what Amanda's saying, and I guess in reading the report about trying to understand how we make it even more flexible for one end of it, I guess that makes it even less attractive as a business opportunity, doesn't it? Because you're spreading your offer even wider. So I suspect making that financially viable makes it even more tough than when it was, you know, a really restricted 3 hours here and 2 hours there or whatever. So sorry, that was the other point I forgot to mention, and apologies.
No, it's fine. Thank you very much for that. Any other comments or questions at this point? Amanda's posed a number of questions. Anyone, any comments on the research and the principles? If you indicate, I'll bring you in. No comments. The actions with the improvements. And the budget. Are we content with what's in front of us? I take that as an approval, Amanda, that's agreed and endorsed. I do think, having had heard all the conversation and all the information, clearly there's the data gathering and the evidence piece being taken forward through Fiona and Fiona's team with Amanda, and so that's been addressed. But I just wonder, really, if Rob, there is a workshop in there for the executive, for all partners, or whoever you think, somebody from early years, or to be populated by those partners that you think would be most appropriate, working through Amanda and Annette's teams, because I do think we need to go back to the point that Jim made around that prioritisation, the focus, what's achievable, but also taking into account that economic development piece. So somebody from Paul's team, and Adam's posed the question about how can we as partners, all of us, facilitate better access to childcare within our own organisation portfolios. So all of that might well be best placed within a workshop environment. So are folks minded to ask the executive to take that forward? Bearing in mind that the executive all need, if you don't mind me saying so, all need to participate. This can't just be for 1 or 2 partners. It has to be across the piece. It has to be for everyone. So I'll make that request, please. Susan, and then we'll move on.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I guess the other bit just to add is I think we do have evaluation on some of the work that we're doing, but there's elements that we're not evaluating, which I think would be helpful just from that learning perspective. And it ties in, I think, with Jim's point about what are the things that we would wish to scale up. So it was just to add that and the offer to work with Amanda and others on it.
That's excellent, Susan. Thank you for that. So a bit more discussion, Amanda, with partners, bearing in mind decisions that have been taken in many different places currently, and with Kerry's help, perhaps, to have a look at some of those other issues that were being raised in terms of the national piece. So that'd be really, really helpful. Thank you all very much indeed. So Amanda, you had recommendations before us, and they're on page 10 of our packs. So can we agree that we've covered all of those and we've provided comment, we've endorsed, and we've acknowledged the achievements? And just on the particularly in the achievements that Amanda raised a little bit and about the advice, information and advice services, just on one of those bureau. Over the last 2 months, there have been a total of 400, just under 500, 492 clients helped with, in 1 month, 328, and in another 562 issues. And in January, 112,822 pounds were financially gained for clients, and last month 134,776, and that's just in one bureau. So you can see that the investment in terms of these things are actually paying dividends. Thank you for that. Okay, thank you all very much indeed for your contributions. We'll move then to item 7, which is Health and Wellbeing LOIP, and the update report from George and Chris, please.
Thank you very much, Chair. I wonder if we might suggest starting with Dan, actually, providing an update on the Health and Wellbeing strand. I believe Dan has got to head off to another meeting shortly.
Okay, Dan, is it a verbal update you're providing? We don't have any paperwork, so.
Yes, it is. It's a verbal
Okay,
update.
thank you, Dan. Yes, that's fine, George. Thank you.
Thanks very much, George. So I'm conscious that AVA's funded activity around mental health and wellbeing comes to an end in 7 months' time. Looking at the main aims of what we were achieving, it was about mapping existing services, it was about identifying gaps, and then it was about supporting community planning partners to agree how to improve support and access across Aberdeenshire. So we're moving into a stage now where we've done the data gathering, we've worked on data with 1,800 organisations across Aberdeenshire. We're in discussion with a tech provider around a locator app, which is a web-based and an app-based service that will be available to practitioners, but also the general public, where organisations and services can be mapped down to a 3-metre square rather than a postcode. That system can be built within 8 weeks. So with the usual slip with technology, I would expect it to be built within 3 months probably. The aim is to have that completely searchable from keywords. It's data that will come directly from AVA's CRM system, and it's data that will be updated on a regular basis by AVA's team. And that's part of our normal work. So we're engaging with organisations on a regular basis and updating data on a regular basis. But it will also be part of a regular data update service that Ava regularly undertakes. So the app will be updated every 3 hours out of Ava's database. So it will be a live service. And I was interested listening to what Amanda was talking about the availability of services in different areas, and then being able to look at the fluctuations in demand and then the supply of services. So that locator app will be part of that and help to enable understanding of what services are available at any time. So that's in a nutshell where we are. Happy to take any questions on that.
Thank you very much, Dan. Any questions for Dan on that feedback? No indications. So again, we just look forward to hearing more of that, Dan. And thank you for your for the lead, taking the lead in this particular aspect of the LOIP. Thank you, George and Chris.
Thank you very much, Chair. Yes, Chris and I are happy to provide an update on the Health Eating Active Living strand of the Health and Wellbeing LOIP priority. The board will recall that in order to progress the Health Eating Active Living strand of the priority, we put in place a HEAL partnership group some time ago, which pulls together all of the key partners working around this agenda in Aberdeenshire. That partnership group, in collaboration with our communities across Aberdeenshire, produced a HEAL action plan, quite a broad-based action plan, as you would see from the paper. The action plan itself consists of 5 high-level strategic themes. Sitting below that, about 35 or so, again, high-level aspirations that relate to those themes. And then sitting under that, we have over 160 currently work streams and individual projects that are currently being progressed. And one of the things that we've been very conscious of, and it's something that very much relates to what Amanda and Fiona were saying in relation to data, is that having a complex action plan has posed some challenges in terms of putting in place a framework which will enable us to collect the evidence that we need to provide you as a board with reassurance and the detail that you need in relation to how those actions are progressing and indeed the kind of impact that they're having over time. So just to reassure that that is something that we're currently working on. We're due to come back to the board with a more detailed update on that piece of work in June, I believe. So we'll happily do that. But certainly it's been very evident that with the action plan being quite broad-based, a number of the actions are quite complex and indeed are attempting to address some of the wider social determinants of health and therefore not necessarily very quick fixes. So we need to give some consideration to the data that we'll need in order to demonstrate the impact of the report, and a similar piece of work underway to what Fiona had in fact described. Actually, we're working with HEAL partners to establish the data that partners routinely collect currently, but equally to identify where the gaps might be in terms of data that we'll need, an evaluation that we'll need moving forward in order to demonstrate the impact. One of the tools that we'll also be using is the whole systems approach logic model, which is Appendix 2, I believe, in your papers actually, and it's a tool that was produced originally by Public Health England actually, and it gives quite a helpful insight into the sorts of changes and outcomes that we might realistically expect to see over shorter, medium and longer term timeframes by using a whole systems approach. So we'll also be using that as a lens through which we can look at our own actions in our Aberdeenshire plan to really tease out the kind of data and the evidence that we're going to need moving forward. So we'll be able to come back to you in June with further detail on that. But further down in the paper, you will see some short updates on some of the work that's currently being taken forward and is reflected in the plan. So under section 3.3.1, a piece of work which has been taken forward by Aberdeenshire Council, which is the discounted Live Life membership scheme, actually, and also the Live Life Well referral programme, which is currently being progressed by Chris and colleagues within Live Life Aberdeenshire, actually. And it's a programme which offers support to individuals living with long-term conditions. So I wonder if I could maybe bring in Chris at this point, actually, maybe just to give you a wee bit more detail on that programme, because I think it's a really interesting piece of work that really does demonstrate the value of this type of programme to improving quality of life for individuals with long-term conditions. Chris, can I bring you in at this stage?
Thank you, George. Thank you, Chair. Afternoon, everyone. Page 86 of the report provides an overview of the health and wellbeing team and the referral programme and highlights the strategic fit and activities on offer aligned to the Aberdeenshire Council plan, the Aberdeenshire Health and Social Care Strategic Plan. It also highlights the numbers engaged in the referral programme and provides examples of the types of programme and support available. This afternoon, I'd like the board to hear from some of those engaged in the programme, and I hope that the testimonies address the so what question in respect of the investment into the programme and demonstrates the value and positive impact of the health and wellbeing of our residents within Aberdeenshire. If you can bear with me for 1 second, I'll share my screen with you all.
We run a referral programme, which is for people living with long-term health conditions, people recovering from injury or illnesses that want to start being active again. The programmes are run over a 12-week period and are free of charge.
Hello, my name's Brenda Watt, and I have been on a cancer journey for 2.5 years. This is why I come to the classes, because the treatment I'm on, it affects all my joints. Coming to the class makes me feel more energetic. I feel more normal when I go to these classes.
I'm Jane. I've got COPD and diabetes. And because of my COPD, we wanted to try and work on my lungs. To come to a sports class is a big, big thing. But once you're through the door, you're made to relax so quickly.
There's all sorts of classes at the different centres. The first half is a bit of a 30-minute chat. It could be the benefits of doing cardiovascular exercise. It could be talking about coping mechanisms of how people maybe cope with long-term conditions. And then the second half of the class is 30 minutes of safe, appropriate, effective exercises. They can do the whole lot seated, the whole lot standing. It depends how they feel that day.
The CFIT programme is a health and wellbeing programme to support active and retired fishermen and their families. Fishing is a very dangerous occupation. They can be at sea for days at a time, so it's very difficult to access healthcare services. It's very difficult to make appointments, follow-ups. They have access to a physiotherapist locally who will see them quickly when they know that they're going to be on shore. We've got similar with dental referral. I will regularly offer health checks. If we can pick something up early for them and signpost them to the correct help, then hopefully in the longer term that's going to be beneficial for their health.
My name is David Bett. I've lost half a foot and my balance was gone. I could hardly walk any distance at all, and I've got 2 burst vertebrae in my back. The pain was horrendous. It was just taking painkillers all the time. I was very sceptic to go, because I wasn't sure what was ahead of me. But believe it or not, it's the best thing that I've done in a long time. It was really good.
I'm Amanda. I use Peterhead Community Centre. I'm a diabetic and stuff, and I've got high blood pressure. The benefits of the classes are amazing, and I'm not just speaking about physically either. I'm so much more focused. I'm happier. I've got my confidence back. I've also made new friends. Whereas before, suffering from anxiety and depression, I wouldn't have gone out, and I basically became a recluse. Now I'm getting out more. I'm healthier, and my eating is a lot better.
I think that the biggest thing is the satisfaction that you see when someone has got that boost in confidence. It's really inspiring how motivated people can be.
Confidence is a big thing, because I would have never gone in a swimming costume and gone in a swimming pool before.
It's the classes itself and the teacher, obviously. It makes you feel good within, and it makes you want to do something.
Once people's gone to physio, then it's a case of, well, where can we go after this? And I don't think everyone knows that it's a free 12-week programme that can help them get physically active again.
They're supported to carry on their journey of health and well-being long after the 12 weeks finishes as well. We support them into making long-term changes to their health. If you're living with a long-term health condition, you're not going to just turn up at sports centre and join a class, because you're never going to have that confidence. And that's what we give you here at Live Life Aberdeenshire, is that confidence to start on your journey of taking more responsibility for your own health.
I have to get up and go in the mornings now. I get up, I do stuff, I go out, meet people.
I'm not taking painkillers every day. I'm actually physically walking 90 times better than what I started to do before I started the course.
I want all our sports centres to really be the heart of our communities, where people want to come and meet other people, socialise and feel better and improve their lives.
Thank you, Chris.
Thank you. Happy to pass over to George or any questions.
Thank you, Chris, and thank you, Chair. And maybe just to finish by highlighting the section in your report 3.3.3, which describes some of the activity under the food accessibility strand of the HEAL plan. And that section describes some of the food growing work that's taken place in North Aberdeenshire, starting initially at Fraserburgh North Primary School, actually an interesting collaboration between the school, the public health team in the Shire and a third sector organisation, One Seed Forward. We're looking to extend that work now into other primary schools in the north and also to some care home settings. But happy to pick up any questions the board may have.
Thank you both very much indeed. And I think the video was inspiring, Chris, and definitely it's great to hear from those who've got that lived experience. And Susan's comment about, I think it was Susan, social prescribing, I'll credit Susan with it anyway, earlier on, absolutely is something that we need to encourage. Any questions or comments, please, for George and Chris? Jim and then John, please. Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. I mean, maybe in a similar theme to that I was asking earlier on in terms of the previous strand, it's a very comprehensive programme of work here, I think, as the report saying, with 164 areas of action sort of taking place in the programme. And yeah, it's also challenges talking about maybe a lack of activity in some areas of the action plan as well. What my query is, I guess, is in terms of the correlation through with outcome and so what an effect that we are seeing here as well. And I'm not seeing that coming through the report maybe adequately. So just a thought, a challenge for me, which is about, in a simple and blunt way, are we doing too much here? are we focused enough in terms of what we are doing here? And do we need to put more attention with the data in terms of correlation of activity intervention and output and outcome in terms of health and wellbeing in terms of communities? So I think that I would be welcoming seeing some more a sort of analytical work and challenge in there to be able to see that we get that sharpness and to maybe think about with the resource constraints of all of our partners and parties, is 135 actions the right volume to do, and do they align with activity? As a second example, maybe just to bring into there, there's some great work and focus here in terms of looking in terms of nutrition and diet for people. Most if not all of the actions we have here are from public service partners. We have a lot of activity going on in the private sector, clearly, with Opportunity North East leading in terms of innovation enterprise, in terms of agriculture, and our good relationship with the NFU Scotland as well in the area. We don't have them on the radar at all in terms of engagement involvement, in terms of how they can contribute as well. So I wonder whether in two respects we could think about that alignment in terms of data and outcome, and think about whether our partners and parties who aren't at the table, who should be, in terms of some of our main food producers in the region, who ought to be right at the heart and middle of the work we're doing here. Thank you.
Thanks, Jim. George, do you want to come back initially on that?
Yes, thank you, Chair, and thank you, Jim. Lots of really valuable points there, actually, and many of those chime actually with the view of the HEAL partnership group, actually. The plan as it stands at the moment is one that was developed around about 18 months or so ago now, and I think it is our view actually that the number of actions are probably too many. One of the things that we've done fairly recently is to establish, or we're in the process of establishing, a series of 4 subgroups, each of which will focus on one of the key overarching themes of the plan. We've started to put in place the food accessibility group, but those subgroups are going to be tasked with reviewing the actions to see if they're still fit for purpose, taking into account the kind of recent and emerging evidence as well. And really trying to kind of unpick the kind of nuts and bolts of what we would need to put in place to demonstrate that those actions, whatever they may be at the end of the day, are the right ones and are making a difference. And they'll also take into account that second point, or that other point that you raised, Jim, which is, do we have the right partners around the table in order to support delivery? One of the things that we have certainly noticed over the last, I would say, 6 to 9 months is that partner capacity to support the plan has really been stretched, actually, which I think is probably a bit of a message that there's probably too much. We maybe need to be a bit more focused and really focus on the things that I think are going to make the greatest difference, have the greatest impact.
Thank you, George. I'm going to take John, Amanda, Susan and Nicola, please. John.
Yeah, I think Jim summed up a really key point, pretty much what was in my mind. But if I can just indicate, sorry about that, indicate a couple of things which might assist with that. You talked, George, helpfully about bringing back data next time round. And I'm looking at the idea that we have, well, the population of Aberdeenshire, 264,000 thereabouts. Research probably a bit out of date, but 32% weight issues. Now that might not be accurate now, but it's almost coming at it from that end, so we can get a handle of what do we need to do in Aberdeenshire, and there may be kind of place element that comes into it, but then you can join up activity in relation to what Aberdeenshire needs, and that for me would be give assurance around where this is heading. And the second point, just a quick one, is the logic model on page 85. These logic models can look seductive. It's not a very good one, and there are much better ones. I'll send you some stuff out with this, and you can, with colleagues, have a look and see. That doesn't give you a very clear theory of change, and we need a theory of what the assumptions, which actions are going to have an impact. So so it's not so much a criticism, but you've got it to a point where you can now take it to this next level. So hopefully that's helpful.
Thank you, John. Yes, indeed, very helpful.
Thank you. Amanda, please.
Thanks, Chair. I think it was possibly for Chris. It was just picking up on that video, and I was making that link back to the social prescribing as well, and that's probably that work that's being done within those facilities is probably reducing the prescribing bill somewhere along the line. But how sustainable is it, Chris? Is it a model that we can continue? What's the long-term future?
In terms of the long-term future, it's year-on-year funding cycles, and conversations are being had with health and social care next week in terms of the ask. We do have a kind of challenge to the operating model as such that because it's year-on-year funding, we do see turnover from the staff delivering, so that then impacts on the confidence of working with challenging communities and population around that trust element. So we are losing staff to fixed employment out with the local authority. So that's something we are trying to address in terms of that kind of longer term job security for the team, but technically it's year on year, and as it currently stands just now, we have funding in place until September this financial year and nothing thereafter. That funding supports a coordinator and 6 members of staff. In terms of the points that Jim made and John possibly made as well in terms of that targeted work, we do use place and data around our health and wellbeing activity programme, so it is very much focused in the north, but as part of the funding agreement through health and social care, we are targeting other areas where we have a known demand across Aberdeenshire as well. So it is spread, but predominantly focused based on evidence needs aligned to place and demand on services technically.
Is it not the case, Chris, that you're delivering that programme for around £70,000 a year?
Yeah, so the budgetary shortfall from September onwards would be about 70,000. A full year cost, kind of in the region of 160 to 200, just based on the staffing complement and the recent pay award as well.
So I'm not going to get into the detail of it. That's for others to do, but perhaps that's a discussion Susan, Adam, Pam can have with Chris and colleagues off table, because I think you'll see that well, we've heard from the lived experience, and I don't know, do we have an estimation of the savings that is accrued as a result of the programme? Again, not for just now, Chris, but maybe that's something that, in terms of that data and that evidence, might be helpful. Susan, please.
Yeah, thanks very much. And I'm probably just going to depress John here, because actually it's 2/3 of the adult population who are overweight or obese. So that's around circa 150,000 in Aberdeenshire. And if we look at children, it's around 1 in 10 at risk of being overweight, and a further 1 in 10 at being risk of being obese at primary 1 age. So we are absolutely looking at, so this is a scale up issue for me, just looking at the activities that are happening, the healthy weight support for those who do need to grow into their body weight. From a child perspective, I think it's 65 parents that isn't sufficient really. So I think looking at things like digital solutions, and I know some of that was in there. I think there's something about how do we stand back and do some big change ideas. There's not many areas that actually have taken a whole system approach and delivered the impact. So this is innovative, and it is challenging. But I agree with Jim's comments around, I think we need to do fewer areas and seek to scale up quite quickly, given the scale of the challenge that we've got.
Thank you, Susan. Chris, do you want to come back in? Then I'll go to Nicola.
Yeah, just very briefly in terms of that scaling up, we know we're barely scratching the surface in terms of the referrals are coming through and the triage period required in terms of that exit pathway. We could probably double that team to try and meet demand, but obviously that becomes a budgetary issue. But yeah, there's no demand out there, and I think the situation is only going to get worse, Susan, in terms of the stats that you've quoted there, unfortunately.
Okay, thank you. And Nicola, sorry for the wait.
Not at all. I was just going to say I loved that video. I thought that was great, but what a huge amount of work to pull that together. You made it look easy, but I think there's so much work goes into it. I was quite curious when I was looking at it, just thinking about, you know, obviously depending where people live and maybe their travel to work area, what connections there are, if there are, around, you know, some of our neighbours like Murray and Aberdeen City and Angus, and whether there might be opportunities to do some joint work there. But given just what you said there with terms of your budget, that might be a stretch too far.
Just come away, Chris.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so in terms of partnership working, we do work closely with our local authorities. We do try and retain, I'm going to say, the postcodes within the boundary. So we say we are aware that Murray have made a decision not to retain their health and wellbeing team around the pathway referral programme. So they have made a budgeted decision around that, and we have regular contact with our neighbouring authorities in terms of the whole project and the programmes that are on offer, but particularly around the health and wellbeing agenda as well.
Thanks, Chris.
Thank you all very much. Any further contributions based on this report? I do think there are some discussions in terms of that focus on fewer actions, George,
Yeah, absolutely,
to actually bring it right down.
Yeah.
I was a wee bit, eyebrows raised a wee bit at the 4 additional subgroups that I read about in the paper. I just think the capacity and resource that we all have is pretty stretched, I think. And I think 4 subgroups was as I say, a raising eyebrow moment for me, I'm afraid, in terms of the ability for people to participate and to contribute to those things. But I think you've heard there's a general view that a wee bit of work done to focus, to have fewer priorities, but priorities that are able to be scaled up. I think there's definitely a consensus that we do need to look at this in terms of place as well. The social prescribing element comes into this in terms of the physical activity, and I would ask the appropriate officers to have the discussion around whether or not the allocations made through budgets to continue with the programme that we've heard from about from Chris, and the video I think could readily be shared with your colleagues, Chris, in terms of the outcomes and the impact it has on people's lives. So happy to leave that with officers to take off table and to discuss. I don't know, Rob, if you want to have an overview through the executive or not, happy to leave that with you, but I think there's a real discussion to be had there. Chris, and then we'll move on.
Thank you, just very quickly, just to say that we are looking at a marketing campaign around that collateral that we've got, so we'll look to communicate that plan around campaigns and then share that with the wider group and partners.
Thank you very much indeed, Chris, and thank you, George. So you said you would report back in June, George. Is that giving you enough time to look at all of these different issues, or do you want to leave it till?
I'm hopeful that will be enough time, Chair. But we'll know over the next few weeks whether we may need a slight extension to that. But if we do, I don't think it'll be too long. Actually, it's been really helpful to have that feedback today, actually, and giving us some real substantive issues that we can take back to the HEAL planning group, actually, for further consideration.
That's excellent. Thank you very much. And maybe Susan, you'd want to have a wee an overview, I don't know, and feed into that group as well. Okay, well, thank you all very much indeed. The recommendation was to consider and comment on the progress. We've seen and heard from George, Chris and Dan today, so I think we can agree the recommendation has been delivered, and we look forward to further information coming back to the board. But thank you all very much indeed. That's been a really interesting and informative discussion. Thank you. Does anybody want a 10-minute comfort break? I realised we've been going on for a wee while now. Or is everybody happy just to press on to finish? Press on in the absence of any other requests? Yep. Okay. Item 8 then is a verbal update from Fiona on place strategy. And I'm sorry, Fiona, but if you could maybe just be as brief as possible. Try and catch up some time. Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, I think a lot of what I was going to say has already been covered in the earlier discussion. It was really just to update people and let the board know that the strategy has been developed. The draft was at strategic leadership team. As Rob and Jim mentioned earlier, there are some internal council processes that it needs to go through. Try to make sure that the strategy sets out a clear framework for the development and delivery of place plans, including scope, decision making and governance, and it provides some clarity on place plans and what they will achieve. At the core of the strategy is a partnership approach and recognition that plans will be partnership plans, and the governance arrangements within the strategy reflect that, and resourcing and delivery of place plans will be on a partnership level. So as I said, the council has internal processes to fulfil. The draft strategy will be presented to full council on the 27th of June, and we'll bring the strategy to the board for endorsement on the 5th of June. And that was a very, very quick run through.
Well, thank you very much indeed, Fiona. Any questions for Fiona at all? I think, as you say, I think a lot of it was covered previously, Fiona, so I appreciate that. And if anyone has any questions in the meantime, I'm sure Fiona will accept an email from you. So thank you very much indeed for that. Sorry to keep you waiting, Angela, but delighted to welcome Angela Keith now to the board. And Angela's going to take us through the evaluation report for the Banff and Macduff and Fraserburgh locality plans outcomes. And with the comprehensive report is before us, but I'll now invite Angela to give us an overview. Thank you, Angela.
Thank you, Chair, and good afternoon, folks. I think you're a wee bit behind timescales, so I'm happy to whip through just a summary of the report that you've had. As Chair highlights, it is a comprehensive run through of all the locality plan and the origins and the reasons for this report today, which was the agreement to cease, connected and cohesive, and all the work that was related to that, which included the Fraserburgh and Banff and Macduff locality plans. So the origins of the locality plans fell out of the Community Empowerment Act, and it sought to address inequality and empower communities to improve outcomes for local areas through the publication of LOIPs and locality plans with that focus at a local level. And that was really to drill into areas where communities were experiencing poorer outcomes because of socioeconomic inequalities and disadvantaged. In Aberdeenshire, we took a collaborative approach to this, with 3 localities being produced, with a focus on Peterhead and Buchan and Banff and Buchan, featuring Fraserburgh and Banff and Macduff. The locality plans were a 10-year strategic plan, but it had regular review points, and key outcomes were developed and topics were set out, straddling both major towns. So in Banff and Macduff, the strong focus was around a resilience and strong community, a well-connected Banff and Macduff and hinterland areas, and the health and well-being needs of Banff and Macduff and the residents. In Fraserburgh, the focus there was more around the improving life chances of people at risk of falling into poverty or those who were already living in poverty. The focus also turned to reduce social isolation, loneliness and poorer social and health outcomes, and that broader picture of health and well-being outcomes. So as much as those topics were very clearly defined across the 2 towns, there was a lot of similarities that straddled across the plans, with higher level outcome themes including individual and community resilience, digital and in-person connectivity to services and activities including social interaction, and of course physical and mental health and well-being aspects. As much as those high-level outcomes, we could see the similarities there. There was a different emphasis that we took across the 2 places. So in Banff and Macduff, there was a much stronger input around place and assets, and in Fraserburgh, that input was more around welfare and a transition for support. The reports were delivered and monitored through the Banff and Buchan locality plan planning group, and the governance sat with connected and cohesive communities, with annual reports linked to the LOIP through to the board. The delivery of the projects sat at that local community planning group level, and 3 thematic-based coordination hubs were set up alongside a North collaborative approach with Buchan to ensure that where there was common issues, these could be addressed, maximising partner and council resources. And of course, they all hinged on close working with local groups and key networks. The plans were reviewed with adaptations and priorities and actions reversed periodically and refocused key timescales around COVID-19 and more recently in the light of the cost of living impacts. So they're very live and iterative plans. A number of key outcomes and learnings were derived from the locality plans and with partners really recognising and forming a place-based approach. And we've established a number of good activities on that basis, with PB exercises coming through, with collaboration being formed strongly with AVA, internal housing teams, place and economy, and other experts like our community networking, it's a tongue twister, Community Chartering Network Citizens Assembly, and they've done a lot of work with the schools in Banff and Macduff. And of course, the Shaping Places for Wellbeing programme in Fraserburgh has really supported our activities. Partners have continued a commitment to tackle complex and deep-rooted challenges that still exist, such as rural transport, antisocial behaviour and food accessibility, with that planning over the long term to draw down on strategic and national resources where funding was available. So this has resulted in a really growth area in collaboration and partnership, enabling us to increase and develop the delivery of a person-centred approach and that tailored wraparound support. We've seen the development of community hub approaches. We've enabled multi-agency community-based drop-in support and engagement opportunities. We've showcased partnership events such as the Wellbeing, Health and Wellbeing events, and more recently from the fire service, the Brew with a Crew, and local surgeries that are straddling over the partnerships of public health, police and fire, offering that local support and advice. And there's a number of other civic-led activities. And I suppose the one to mention would be the work of that NESCAN approach and the Shaping Places of Wellbeing community network, where we've created a citizens assembly to understand the qualitative and quantitative information relating to the impacts of inequalities in Fraserburgh. So a wealth of work has been done, and we welcomed the opportunity to present this locality plan and the closeout reports to be able to reflect and tentatively start scoping out both our continuing priorities and actions to be taken forward as we prepare for the development and introduction of the place plans. So the next steps, now that the locality plans are ceased, we will ensure that the continued priorities will feature in the Banff and Buchan Community Plan, and there'll be local scrutiny and reporting in that interim period between the close down of the plans, moving into the community plan arena, and then ultimately with the introduction of that place-based framework that Fiona mentioned earlier. There's a lot of work undergo to embed that place-based approach into the focus, and there's working arrangements within the LCPG, including stakeholder engagement, to generate the area profiles to fully scope out and sense check what the place-based priorities and delivery frameworks for the Banff and Buchan area will be. And this will include critical reflections on the projects that the report has highlighted for yourselves today. Consider what the partnership arrangements are going forward, be data informed around our priority set and evaluation mechanisms. So there's a lot to be learned from the locality plans, and I think most importantly, just that place-based assessment approaches that will be absolutely relevant and prevalent as we move towards that place-based approach. I won't go through some of the projects, Chair, because I think they're noted in the appendices, and hopefully everybody's had a chance to familiarise them with themselves with some of the good activities that have been undertaken, and I'm happy to answer any questions on any of them.
Thank you very much indeed, Angela. And as you said, it's a very well presented report with lots of information, and your overview has been extremely helpful. So thank you very much indeed for that. Colleagues, I just open it up to yourselves now for any comments. Adam, please.
Thanks, Angela. Thanks so much. Yeah, really good report. I've got two questions. The first one is, if you were to kind of think about the projects and that huge array that's in the appendix of things, what's the learning in terms of what do we get the biggest bang for our buck from? So what are the things, you're at that level of learning, and I'm sure there's lots of process learning and all that other really valuable things as well, but where did the greatest leverage come, do you think? So that's my first question. And my second one is, I'm new to this board, so I'm just catching up with the place-based work, and we've had a few mentions of it through things. So it was just to understand for me, in Banff and Buchan, how many of the 17 place-based plans will you have, and what do you think's, the maturity into the place-based? What will that be different for the people that live in the different parts of Banff and Buchan? Thanks, Anne.
Okay. I think there is a lot of learning, but the biggest bang for the buck is the collaboration. Absolutely, the strength in coming together as a partnership. That undoubtedly identified where there was an opportunity to collaborate, to work together, to join resources, to make sure there wasn't the duplication or overlap, the unintended consequences of the actions that maybe one partner does that has on the other. But I think coming together in that local forum and really working on projects together has really heightened our understanding of the local issues, but also the local opportunities to resolve them. So, and fundamentally, I think the assessment tool that we're now wrapping around all of the assessments of priority projects with the Shaping Places for Wellbeing assessment has really offered us a really solid fundamental mechanism to really understand our impact on place as we undertake some of our activities. So that for me, I think, and George is nodding his head, so hopefully he's agreeing with me, but that has really offered us some really tangible insight into the work that we're doing, but also really highlights some of the challenges that are not just faced by the council, but actually cross over all our partnership agencies. So they're wicked problems that we're all trying to address. So for me, that the strength in that collaboration, and a number of the projects you'll see are not council led, they're partnership, they're partnership. We've got public health coming through there, fire, police, key partners that are instrumental in the delivery of this. So hardly any of them delivered by by one partner on their own. Yeah. And your second question in Banff and Buchan, I anticipate that we will have, because we're at a fairly early stage of developing our place plan and our strategy. So at this point in time, I would anticipate that I'd have 2 key place plans for Banff and Macduff, with a key feature around Banff and Macduff presenting as one town. I'm sure there'll be some question marks raised around that, but I think that makes sense in terms of the resources and that multi-agency approach again, and Fraserburgh being the second place plan that we would turn our focus to. So those key 2 towns. There is other emerging areas, sort of smaller towns, that I think the data will inform us as to where there is other issues that we'll have to turn some focus around, but those would be the key, I think, starting points for us.
Okay, Adam? Yep, okay, thank you, Angela. Any other questions for Angela? Comments? Really, I would ask Angela, are all partners taking this report back through their organisations to make sure that what you have done is not lost? And it's a basis on which to build. So are all our partners, maybe it's a question for the partners, taking that through their organisations? Maybe that's something that I can leave with you, Angela.
Yeah, I mean, certainly we've done an update and we used the opportunity of this reflection in the report and we've presented it back to our local partners. So we presented it to our last joint meeting where we presented it to the elected members, our area management team and our local community planning partners. So they're familiar with the closeout arrangements and our reflections on the projects and the work that we've done to date, because it provided a really good scene setting for moving into that place-based arena moving forward. And it helped us to digest and share some of the thinking around how we would approach that going forward. So it was really helpful, and I'd be happy to present this to any other partner if they felt there was learning or, you know, a continued discussion around what we've presented here today. Happy to do that.
Well, thank you. I think that's a really good offer. So if there's anybody around the table wants to take Angela up on that, just to make sure that the work is not lost within the organisations and we can embed what needs to be embedded. So thank you for that, Angela. John, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Well, actually, in liaison with yourself and Pam, we can discuss that for the IJB, what's useful for that. I was wondering, there's some really good learning from this, and then the different partners have their ways of interfacing with communities. But if you're mentioning it's a partnership-led approach, is there conversations going on about sharing capacity of how we interface with communities across Aberdeenshire? And because if we're doing that, we'll probably be able to do more, but share things better. I'm just conscious of some exercises which different partners do separately. Are we at the stage where we're able to talk about how we can share capacity for doing this?
Chair, you okay? Yeah. Yes, I think it straddles through everything, John, that we do. You know, there is a temptation to just get on and work in our silos, isn't there, to get the job done. But we have regular local community planning group meetings where we encourage not just the partners to update on the activities they're doing on their own, but to consider how we can add value to that work by extending it into that multi-agency forum. And sharing of resources is really key. I suppose an example I think that I could highlight is the Wellbeing festivals that public health are really key in organising, but there has been last year, my team and a couple of officers that third sector partners, in fact, have been very inclusive of that event. And what we're planning this year is absolutely an example of where we're sharing resources, where we're sharing facilities, where we're sharing costs. So it's very much multi-agency led because we can see the benefits of that. And likewise, I suppose, with the example in the reports around the fire service doing their brew with the crews, that's another example. There, as much as they came up with that idea, it's multi-agency because what you've got there is public health, you've got health and social care partnership staff that are supporting there. We've got welfare rights officers that are straddling around that so that it's that one touch point of advice and support. So it's more than just that. It ticks so many boxes around social isolation, advice, support, networking. So all of that comes together into a neat package of a really rounded project where we're all sort of committing our own resources and facilities because we can see the long-term benefits of that.
Okay, thanks. And maybe it's something we can do as board members, just check in with our organisations as to how that's going forward and joining up. Thanks.
Thanks, John. Thank you, Angela, again. Any other comments or questions for Angela? I don't see any indications. So the recommendations on page 108 are there at 1.2.1, 2 and 3. There are no changes being suggested, Angela, but I think we can record, Finlay will record the fact that you would be willing to go and present to any partner or organisation from the community planning partnership point of view in terms of this report. And again, it is about making sure that we all take back within our own entities the information and raise awareness to make sure that we continue with the approach, and that we support that, and that we try not to lose any of the good work that's been done already. But the place plan will pick that up, Angela, and you'll move that through.
Yeah, indeed.
Okay, so the recommendations are agreed. And again, thank you so much, Angela, for all the work that you've done over many years, actually, to get us to the point of being able to see this evaluation. And thank you and all your colleagues across the partnerships for all the work that has happened. And we wish you all well going forward, and look forward to seeing your place plans coming forward. So thank you very much indeed. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob.
Item 10 on the agenda is a presentation from Matt Lockley from Scottish Enterprise, and it's the corporate plan for 2023 to 2026. So just hand over to you now, Matt. Thank you. You're welcome.
Yep. Thanks, Chair. I'll try to share my screen if you could let me know if you can see this, and I'll put it into presentation mode. Are you seeing that?
Has everybody got that? Yep.
Okay.
Yes, thank you, Matt.
I can't see hands up or whatever. So if you could maybe hold questions till the end. I've only got a handful of slides, and then because I can't see your hands up. Okay, so thanks for letting me have the opportunity to talk through our new corporate plan, which was launched back in January at Valloom, actually out in Dice. The First Minister and our Chief Exec were up here in the Northeast to launch the plan. So it's a bit of good PR for the Northeast in terms of the choice of launch location. So I'm going to run through a bit about Scottish Enterprise in terms of our background, just a bit of a refresher, and then some of the highlights from the corporate plan. I'll try and be as quick as I can, bearing in mind the time. A bit about Scottish Enterprise. So we are the National Economic Development Agency. Obviously, we cover most of Scotland apart from Highlands and Islands and the south of Scotland, but we also have national responsibilities around things like innovation strategy and international aspirations of the Scottish Government more generally. So we do have a kind of pan-Scotland coverage with a lead agency in terms of delivering NSET, and you can see there our kind of principles in terms of how we are working on transformational activity, some principles around the relationships that we have, the role that we want to play in terms of transforming the economy, how we do that by providing solutions and insight, and primarily about being outward looking and partnership focused. Some stats about Scottish Enterprise, and I can dig into these in a bit more detail if people want to, but on average £300 million a year that we invest into the economy. That's a combination of capital grants, investment that we make into companies, and that can be equity and loans and so on, and also revenue support that we provide to companies. We've got obviously 1,300 staff. You can see the split there. There's the numbers don't add up, but there's obviously a kind of back office function, and then we also have some staff who are employed overseas on contracts in multiple locations around the world who fulfill our international obligations and ambitions. Over the last 5 years, some numbers here. So again, I won't go into much detail on these. I've got some numbers that are more regionally focused, if that's of interest to this partnership. I can provide those separately, but. So these numbers are kind of headline over the last 5 years, but in terms of the most recent figures we have for the Northeast as a region, we can't split out city and shire very easily. But in terms of the region, in 22-23, we supported the creation of 920 new living wage jobs. We invested £50 million in innovation, 8 million capital investment into projects, and 42 million of growth funding into businesses. So those are the types of numbers in the 2022-23 financial year that we invested in the Northeast specifically. Our new corporate plan recognises the need for change, and partners have been speaking about these types of things a lot on the call today in terms of public spending constraints, some of the capacity issues that we have in terms of being stretched. But obviously for us as an economic development agency, some of these pressures and challenges are slightly different in focus. But these are obviously the types of things that come through to us, both in terms of the policy agenda that we're responding to, and also our business, the companies that we work with and the businesses that we work with, the types of pressures that they're facing, and that therefore shape how our corporate plan has been developed. Our response to that is very much about focusing more clearly on where we add most value and where we can make the most difference in terms of transforming the economy. So I think historically it's fair to say that Scottish Enterprise has been quite a broad portfolio of activity that's evolved over time. So this corporate plan is very much trying to bring a bit of focus back to what we do, and really work on those areas where we think we've got the best chance of success, but also where we can leverage the expertise and skills that we've got, and for example, things like our investment portfolio. There is a link here, and I think Finlay will send these slides around, but there's a link to some key mega trends that have kind of influenced our new corporate plan. I would really recommend, if you get a chance, to have a look at that document, which sets out some of the things that we've used to kind of shape our new corporate plan. So it's things like societal change that won't come as any surprise in terms of demographics and so on, but also things like hyperconnectivity, the difference between virtual and physical environments these days, climate change. So that megatrends document is quite helpful in terms of setting out the background to how and why we've come up with this new corporate plan and new focus. So what we're focused on, this is our kind of corporate sweet spot diagram. I'm not a massive fan of that word, but that sweet spot in the middle is how we're trying to kind of transform or have a transformational impact on the economy. So the three in the yellow blocks on the outside, energy transition, scaling innovation, and driving productivity, those are our three new missions. I'll come on to a bit more about what we mean by those, but all supporting that kind of, where we see the biggest transformational impact in the economy coming from, and again, reinforcing where we see Scottish Enterprise's key role in all of that. So that's just rehearsing the same thing, really. Internationally competitive energy transition industry, scaling the impact of our innovation strengths, and driving capital investment. I'll explain a bit more about what we mean by those in the next few slides, and their relevance to this region, I guess, is most important. So energy transition, obviously for the Northeast, extremely well placed, and a lot of the activity that's being developed under Scottish Enterprise's energy transition mission is based in the Northeast. So we've got a team now of over 120 people working in energy transition, not all based in this region by any means, but certainly with the expertise and the skills and the networks to support activity in this region. And I'm sure you'll have seen this map or a similar version of it previously, but I think it goes to underline the scale of the opportunity in the Northeast. So certainly from my perspective, representing the Northeast's interest, if you like, back to Scottish Enterprise, this mission is very key to our overall ambitions, but also to supporting the ambitions of the region and the regional economic strategy. So I think the fact that energy transition is one of our three missions is a real strong point for Aberdeenshire and the Northeast. In terms of scaling innovation, two projects here that are obviously based in Aberdeen City just by virtue of their location, but supported through Opportunity Northeast. Scaling innovation is about how we can help businesses with that level of ambition to grow quickly and to develop those high-level, high-skilled jobs of the future. Some stats that underpin this mission. So 1% of UK business stock is classed as a scaling business, but they create 50% of SME turnover. So you can see the kind of the gain here. If you can increase the number of businesses that scale up, that kind of exponential growth in terms of turnover. So for us, it's a key driver of job creation and growth. And these are two projects in the Northeast that we have supported and continue to work with partners on. So SeedPod on the left and BioHub on the right. So the innovation mission is both about Scottish Enterprise supporting capital investment in innovation infrastructure, but also about how we support innovative businesses around these assets and how we can support partners to develop pipelines of companies to benefit from these assets and then stay in the region and grow in the region. So again, I think the Northeast very well placed on the innovation side. in terms of the productivity mission, the rationale behind this one is more about closing the gap. So you can see from this graph on towards the far right there that productivity investment in Scotland is very low historically compared to other nations, and if we were able to kind of shift Scotland even into the third quartile, which is the block to the left of where we are now, it would be a significant gain in terms of business productivity and private sector investment into businesses. So the driver for this one is about bringing more capital investment, both public and private, into companies, and also about ensuring that we've got fit for purpose facilities, whether that's manufacturing or life sciences or whichever sector, high growth sectors, that we've got fit for purpose facilities and sites in Scotland that can service the opportunities for more productive businesses. So again, the picture on the left here is an example of what we're doing in the northeast. So that's the site that's owned by Scottish Enterprise just to the south of Peterhead. And in terms of that productivity mission, we would see this site being one that we would want to bring forward. It may well sit in an energy transition as well in terms of its location, but in terms of that investment in advanced manufacturing facilities, for example, that's the type of thing that we might want to see on that site. The picture on the left is obviously not Aberdeenshire, but again, an example of the fact that a lot of industrial stock in Scotland needs investment in terms of bringing it up to modern standards and net zero standards. So that's an example of an industrial park where we have worked with landlords and so on to invest in upgrades to manufacturing space, and that's something that we will be looking to do through manufacturing challenge activity into the future. So I think kind of healthy and very strong alignment to our new regional economic strategy for the northeast. Clearly, the strongest alignment is with the Thriving Economy programme area. The other three programme areas are less, directly relevant to Scottish Enterprise, and I think it's more difficult for us to see a kind of very active role in those other three. But obviously we will be a strong and hopefully leading partner in terms of the Thriving Economy programme area, and the vision for the regional economic strategy that's set out here, and I'm sure you'll all be aware of, again aligns very strongly with what we're saying in Scottish Enterprise's corporate plan around just transition, diversifying the economy, innovation, and green energy, and so on. So I think the North East is well placed to be a strong contributor to Scottish Enterprise's corporate plan. Final few slides. So just a bit about how we'll work. Obviously, we can't do this on our own, and we don't historically work in isolation. So a lot of our activity is in partnership, and we're very keen to continue and expand that kind of partnership approach to how we work. And we've got good examples of how we're working with regional initiatives to do that. So some in the northeast around energy transition zone, for example, investment zone. We're very kind of strong player in the investment zone proposal in terms of how that's being developed. But in other areas of the country, we're working with partners around things like life sciences innovation, Edinburgh Bioquarter, Clyde Gateway. So they're all examples of where we're very heavily involved in sort of formal partnership arrangements. Part of our ethos, as you'd expect, being a government agency, is very much around fairer and greener. So all of our work has to kind of pass Fair Work First tests, and also all of our work has to be kind of net zero compliant. So that's particularly relevant to where we invest in businesses. So businesses have to kind of sign up to Fair Work First principles, and they have to have kind of net zero action plans or be willing to work towards them. And the same goes for tackling inequalities. So obviously the Fair Work agenda there, but also we do have a strong kind of aspect to our work around employee ownership of companies and things like social enterprise development. That sits with Scottish Enterprise still as one of our functions. So using those type of models to help tackle inequalities is still an important part of what we do. And I'll pause there, Chair. Sorry, that was a bit of a rattle through, but I was mindful of time, so I'll stop sharing so I can see you all again. I think Finlay will be sharing the slides. and I can certainly share links to anything else that's of interest.
Well, thank you very much indeed, Matt. That was a really interesting presentation, and thank you for that. And Finley's way ahead of us all. He's got the slides circulated already, so they are with all members already. So thank you for that. Questions for Matt or any comments or observations, please? You've stunned everybody into silence, Matt.
That wasn't the intention, but maybe...
Obviously the presentation was extremely clear, and there are no comments. I just wonder, Matt, could you maybe just let us know how that strategy works across or aligns with or meshes with the RES, the Regional Economic Strategy, and the REP, the Regional Economic Partnership? I think you're probably involved, or your colleagues will be involved in all of that too. So is there a cohesion and an alignment?
I think, I suppose, as with all of these things, I mean, one predates the other. So I think the RES kind of predates our corporate plan, and you know, getting these things to align in sequential order is probably quite a challenge. But I think certainly in terms of the RES, the thriving economy theme area is obviously where we will have most impact, hopefully, and we'll be able to support most activity. The way the RES is structured around kind of the human capital and the natural capital and so on, those aspects of it don't lend themselves very neatly to what Scottish Enterprise does. But that's not to say we won't be involved in discussions around them. But I think the thriving economy one is the one where we'll be most actively involved, and and where we'll want to invest in projects and activities in the northeast. And certainly in the role that I have, I'm really keen that we are actively putting forward ideas from this region that Scottish Enterprise can look to invest in. In terms of the Regional Economic Partnership, yes, we're a kind of I suppose a founder member of that. It met for the first time a few weeks ago. So again, we'll be actively working with that and trying to support the development of the project team that sits around all of that, and working with that in the future. So hopefully that will all align.
No, that's helpful. Thank you. It's just so that everybody understands that we're not, there's not lots of different things that you're actually all working across the piece. So that's helpful. Thank you. And I wonder, Nicola, in terms of the skills piece, sorry to pick on you, again, you would have some input into the economic development side of things as well?
Yeah, totally. I think after the workshop we had at some point last year, one of the recommendations from the board was to take it through tackling poverty and inequalities for feedback as well. So my colleague Alison Carrington, who's our skills lead, who's leading on that piece around the skilled population bit and the skills plan that sits under it, took that through tackling poverty and inequalities and had a good discussion. And I think it will be iterative as well. We need to be, I think we've used the word having to pilot and pivot and respond to change. So I think we'll just have to do that as well as circumstances change out there.
No, that's helpful, Nicola. Thank you very much. But I hope people can start to see that the alignment that we can all make from economic development, place economic development, health and social care, health and well-being. I think it's really coming together in terms of how they're all interlinked. So thank you for that. Matt, I don't see any other indications. So Finlay has circulated the slides to members, and I'm sure if anyone has any questions that they think of later, they can come back to you if that's okay.
Of course, yeah. And there's plenty more information.
Perfect.
If anybody wants any more background detail, I can send other stuff on. Just shout.
That's really helpful, and perhaps a touch in or from time to time with you in terms of progress, and if there are any complications or issues or anything that you want partners to look at from their perspective would be really helpful.
Yep. Okay.
No, thank you very much for your time, Matt. Thanks very much for your presentation. Thank you. Item 11 then is the Aberdeenshire Learning Community Partnership Annual Progress Report, and I'm very pleased, and it says on the covering report on your agenda it's 2022 to 2022. But I'm happy to welcome, it's not yours I don't think, Dominique. Happy to welcome Dominique Carlisle-Kitts to the meeting, and Dominique will just give us an overview of the report that's before us on page 149. 29 of your pack. So just hand over to you now, Dominique, and thank you for attending. Thank you.
Thank you, and apologies. Yes, it's for 2022 to 2023, and so the report provides an annual update to you on the work that the Community Learning and Development Partnership has been doing, and it's nice to see some colleagues from the partnership in the meeting. Right in front of me is Nicola and George. So you'll see that we've progressed well against the current plan. A key focus has been on refreshing membership, looking at the learning needs, and also the move to 6 local learning community partnerships, which has been very well received, and partners across a range of organisations are now able to attend and be more active because they are required to go to less partnership meetings. So we're having a real positive feedback in relation to that, and it feels like already, whilst these are at the early stages, we've got broader representation for people from people who want to be around the table and who can contribute. So that's a really positive shift, and we've spent a lot of time focusing on that. And there's a broad range of partners stepping up and co-chairing in these spaces as well, even though Community Learning and Development is providing the initial support. So these are working really well. Also, you'll see that we noted that there was a CLD partnership inspection, and these have been happening across the country. Every local authority is receiving one of these. A visit from Her Majesty's Inspectorate. It's a short inspection, and it's an inspection of the partnership, and this was very positive, and we had good feedback on this. And at the time of me submitting the report, we hadn't had our final feedback. So I intend to bring a report to the CPP board with a bit more detail and some ideas about how we're going to progress some of the areas from that report at a further meeting. But it was a positive experience, and we got good feedback during that process. So really, that's all I wanted to say. I'm keeping it very brief because I know you're almost running out of time. And I remember when I was last here, you did ask to come, don't be a stranger, and come back before the year. And I'm sorry we haven't been able to do that this year, but we will be back before the year next year.
Excellent, Dominic. Thank you very much. And again, what you and your colleagues do certainly adds to that community wealth building, community capacity building, and actually reaches out across the whole partnership that we have here. So again, it's often, I think, unseen what it is you and your colleagues actually deliver. So it's a good opportunity for us to hear from you today and to look at the progress report. So thank you to you and your colleagues for everything that you do for our communities and with our communities. So thank you. Any comments or questions for Dominique? John?
Yeah, yes, just a very simple one. So we've talked about place earlier and being linked around the 17 academies. So this would dovetail quite easily with that, I assume. Yeah, getting a nod.
Yes, we are focusing on the 6 local learning community partnerships, and we have invited colleagues from education to be part of that, and it is fitting nicely for them, and meaning that they are not overstretched. So we're having a nice connection with a variety of partnerships because of our move to 6.
Okay, John.
Yeah, thanks.
Yep, okay. Are you engaged, Dominique, in conversations that are starting around that place planning? Because I think this is, you'll be key part of that.
Yes, we are involved in those place planning conversations and pieces of work, absolutely.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? No? Everybody's content. The recommendations is to consider, comment on and recognise the work undertaken by the partnership on the delivery of the second year of the published Learning Partnership CLD plan, which takes us to 2024. But Dominique, again, can I just, on behalf of the board, thank you and your colleagues again, and if we can record that thanks, Finlay, to all the teams that report through here, for all the work that you do, and perhaps when you come back next, I don't know if there's an opportunity for you to have a little video presentation of some of the, you know, the outcomes and some of the service users and some of the impacts that you have. I think it's always good to see and hear that.
I will put that to the partnership, and we will go about developing up one of those.
That's perfect. Thank you.
Thank you.
So thank you very much in the meantime, Dominic, and thank you for the report, which we have approved the recommendation.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Item 12 on the agenda is the finance update report and the community planning partnership budget. The paper is attached, but Fiona, would you like to introduce this, please?
Thanks, Chair. As you've said, this is the annual budget report for the Community Planning Partnership, and it sets out the funding that is received by partners as well as the funding commitments of the partnership. The report sets out those commitments and obligations of the board during 23-24. So board members will recall that following a request from the board in 2022, a financial strategy was developed, and this was presented to the board last year. And following on from that strategy, bids for funding were received, and those are set out in the report. They include funding provided to the Mind Your Mind project, as well as contributions towards police planning in Formartine and Kincardine and Mearns areas. Those area managers have provided an update on progress with those police plans, confirming that work is underway to develop a police plan for Turriff, with an initial project meeting being held in January this year, and a meeting with the community group in February. In Kincardine and Mearns, conversations are ongoing around the most appropriate settlement for a police plan, with Portlethen and Lawrencekirk both being identified as potentials. The report also seeks board approval for a refresh and update of the Community Planning Partnership website, and discussions are underway with our current website provider, who has been assessed by procurement as providing best value, and we're looking to update and refresh our Aberdeenshire website. The costs of that are detailed in the report. Should partner contributions remain at the same level as previously agreed, there would be sufficient budget for this website refresh. So partners are also requested to confirm financial contributions for the current financial year. So there's been lots of chat around the budgetary constraints that all partners are currently feeling, and the board is requested to consider the financial contributions of partners, particularly in light of these constraints that we're all feeling. Thank you, Chair, and happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much indeed, Fiona. And do members have any questions for Fiona? Jenny, please.
Not so much a question. It was just to say that the Next Strands contribution for next financial year, the continuation of funding, was included in our board report in February. So the Next Strands board did approve that in principle, subject to our own funding being confirmed, but we've still got to wait and hear if we get our Scottish Government grant. But that was the proposal that was included and approved by board.
That's very helpful to have that feedback, Jenny. Thank you very much indeed for that. If anyone else wants to offer up on their organisation's behalf, or you can let Fiona know as we go forward, but we do need to have some idea of where we are with the financial situation. Adam, please.
Thanks, and apologies for not asking this question up front or warning, but when I reread the papers, I reread it slightly differently. So just a couple of questions. I couldn't quite understand why only 3 of the partners were in the table contributing. So that was one thing, because there's many partners. And I think when I'd first read it, I thought it was sort of all infrastructure to run the partnership, which is absolutely reasonable and appropriate. And I just wasn't sure about then the bidding in bit and the sort of rationale for that rather than other bits, because it seemed slightly contrary with what we do collectively, but the scale of it. So two questions, and absolutely honestly, there's no issue with our 12,000 quid at all. So I'm not wriggling off it. I'm trying to understand the rationale, because it didn't quite make sense to me. So that was all.
Well, if Finlay can get that minuted that Adam's putting £12,000 on the table, that's fine. And then Fiona, do you want to give a sort of background, please?
Yeah, sure, no problem. Thanks, Adam. Excuse me. Sorry. Yeah, with regard to the 3 partners who contribute, I think historically those have been the 3 partners that have contributed financially toward the board. Those have been the 3 that have been contributing since I came into this post in June 2020. And I think that's on the basis that those were the ones who were able to at the beginning. And this report comes forward every year. So yeah, it's historical, and those are the partners who have agreed to contribute financially. The council's contribution is in terms of the staff and the management and the administration of the community planning partnership. Excuse me. In terms of the what we use the money for, so historically the money was used for community planning projects. There wasn't any particular kind of process around how different organisations could ask for money from the community planning partnership. We have given money to a number of different projects over years, looking at Mind Your Mind, looking at different things that have been delivered under the LOIP priorities. And last year we developed a financial strategy which was approved by the board, and we sought bids from partners for that money for specific projects.
Thanks.
But they would be linked back across the priorities. And
Yeah, projects are linked to the LOIP priorities.
Yeah.
And
yeah, surely.
Sorry, Anne, if I could come back in. Yeah, so I just wonder if, as a partnership, we just need to revisit that maybe all partners should be asked to contribute. There's just something about that commitment to it, isn't there? I would say they're all very small sums of money. Just a thought to maybe feed into what we do going forward. And I'd agree the council contributes hugely in the bit. So I wasn't meaning the council, but I was meaning all the other partners, of which are we not about a dozen listed in the legislation or something? Thanks.
Yeah, but I think it's the ability to pay. Some organisations are much smaller than others, and so it was on that. But I mean, if that's a request, I don't know what other members want to comment on. I'll leave it open for folk to think on that a minute. But it would have to be remitted, I think, through the executive, and because we have got a financial strategy in place that we agreed. But Graham, did you have your hand up a wee minute ago?
Thanks, Anne. It was just to say that our money's safe for you if you want to get the invoice in sooner rather than later.
That's perfect. I do agree. All good news.
I do agree with Adam as well in terms of maybe it's worth that review moving forward in terms of who contributes and their ability to do so.
Okay, any other views on that? I mean, really, it's from partners, Nicola?
Yeah, no, I totally get the fairness around that. I just think as a national partner, we sit on 32 CPPs. So it's that times 32 is our kind of difficulty. But I totally get the question.
Yeah. Any other views from partners that are here? I think we've maybe lost some of them anyway to other meetings. But Susan?
Yeah, and I wonder if there's something about money or actual resources, because I'm very conscious that we've had conversations before where in these financial climates it's quite hard to identify cash to come in, but I know a number of partners provide tangible support to programs moving in. So I think there's something about that wider, which just signals our commitment to community planning.
As an example, we couldn't have allocated monies to Stonehaven and Turriff in terms of their place plan, where they've engaged an external expert to help them to manage through the process. Because if we don't always have the capacity and resource within the council, and certainly within the area management teams, to be able to do that without a real impact on other parts of the work. So again, it's a balance, I think, Susan, in terms of who allocates what resource or what kind of resource. I think we're going to have to think about that too, because we've got a place strategy. This board has agreed that's the way forward to enable 2 areas to undertake the place planning programme, and we've supported them through this partnership with some financial backup. So again, I think it's checks and balances. But Adam, it may not be possible, as Nicola has said. They sit on 32 authorities, 32 boards. So again, it's how that is fair and balanced. But as I say, I don't know if anyone anywhere else has any thoughts. But I mean, we can't force a payment. It's voluntary, I believe, Fiona. Is that not correct? Yep. So we can't mandate it. We can only ask.
Sure.
Yeah.
And it's not a big deal. It's just a request.
No, that's fine. That's fair enough. Yep.
I'm pretty certain my director of finance will thrash me as well for the 12 grand, but I thought I'd take the risk, So
well, it was reduced from you used to pay more, but we reduced it for you in the past. So there was a review some time ago now, Adam. But we'll certainly send Alec into the arena. We'll have a discussion. So no, but I appreciate that, and happy to remit back through you, Rob, to have that discussion with the executive colleagues, and that'll pick that up there. And Mr. Stephen will be there himself. But I think you have to weigh up the benefits of supporting some of these projects and what benefits we've had in the past from that spend. It's not a lot of money. But in terms of the spend with communications, Fiona, what's the hit and what benefits do we get from the website? And how do we promote the fact there's a website there as partners?
Yeah, you might need to let me take that one away.
Happy to do so.
Sure. Yeah, we can provide some kind of benefit analysis when we come back in June, if that's okay.
Yes, of course. I think that's a question that was in my mind when I read it. What is the benefit? We've all got websites. So how do we use that facility? How do we do other partners share the links to our website? What's the way, how does it work? Because if we're populating it, and expending the money to update it, redesign it, etc., we need to get a return on it, and we certainly need to ensure that other partners are making the links, because I'm just not sure if there's a wide awareness of the fact it's there. And do we put links on it to other organisations that we partner with? If we got a link to Skills Development Scotland, for example, or Police Scotland North East Division, or I'm just not sure how we manage that. Does the Health and Social Care Partnership feature? Is there a link there? Do we do the return? I don't think we do. So again, I think we maybe need some more questions around that. Is there a time limit for the allocation of that money, Fiona?
So I think the current contract with the provider expires in June, I think, off the top of my head.
Right.
So, I can circulate some information to board partners ahead of the meeting and ahead of the expiry of the current contract, and we can take it from there if that's okay.
That would be helpful. Thank you. If we can get that information to everybody, and can we put an additional recommendation that we delegate it to the director, Mr. Simpson, in consultation with myself and Adam as chair and vice chair, to agree the allocation of that funding or not, based on what we see and hear. Do we need a website? or what else do we put round it to make sure that our website is up front and centre. So if that's agreeable to the board, we'll take that delegation and through Rob in consultation with Adam and myself, and we'll make a decision based on the information that you get. But I think I'll know the outcome, but I think we need to ensure that we get good value for that website, from that website.
Happy to agree that.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you very much for that. Thank you. Is anybody else got any last call? So Finlay, for the minute, we've got a delegation to attach at 1.2.4, and we've got 1.2.2 has been agreed based on what partners have said here today. 1.2.3 is the amended one, and we've noted the budget monitoring information. So with that, are we content? And can you also note in the minute, Finlay, that there's a deferral or a referral to the executive to look at the funding allocate the funding element of the partnership. Okay, that's agreed then. Thank you very much. And item 13 is the date of the next meeting, which is the 5th of June from 2 to 4:30. And Fiona will circulate that briefing note in the meantime. So can I thank you all very much indeed for your attendance. I'd just like to thank Alison for coming along to observe. I hope your observations have been fruitful and helpful. And thank you very much, everyone, for your time and for your participation today. And I hope we see Adam again. I hope we haven't put you off too much, Adam. So
not at all.
Okay. Thank you all very much indeed. It's been really good discussion. So thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Cheerio,
Thank you.
everyone.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye now.
Thanks,
Bye.
everyone. Thank you.